Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into SEC Nightly, the nightly show dedicated to the top news and notes from the nation's top conference. Tonight, we're going to be talking to John Garcia, the lead recruiting analyst for SI.com and SI All-American. He's going to give you all the updates of the top remaining targets and, some fireworks still left to go off in the 2020 class. We had some news break today. Auburn got themselves quite a big tight end. And Georgia got themselves an in-state running back as well. Class is kind of rounding out. They're coming to a conclusion, and we'll kind of get the overall landscape and what all's going on in the recruiting world from John here in just a moment. And then we will close tonight's show with a little bit of NFL draft talk. It's draft season. Look, it's coming up. It's going to be all the talk on ESPN and the NFL Network over the next several, weeks and months leading up to April's NFL draft. Of course, everyone loves the NFL Combine, so we'll get to see that as well. And some of these names we're going to talk about tonight might change. But, we're going to go through all the SEC names. I'll list all the guys from the conference that have received first-round grades. They've at least been put into one major market, mock draft, whether that be Bleacher Report, Todd McShay, Mel Kiper, SB Nation, all these major, SI.com, all these major outlets do all their famous mock drafts. There's 22 names that have received at least one first-round mock. So we'll go through it. I'll list those names, and then we'll separate them into categories and talk about 6 guys in particular. But before we get into that, I told you we're going to bring my buddy John Garcia Jr. in to talk the latest and greatest recruiting news. So let me patch John in here on the broadcast. John, how are we doing out there in the Big Apple, New York City, in a nice, dapper-looking suit? I appreciate you dressing up for the occasion, my brother.
Yeah, you'd like to take credit for this, but I was in studio today. I'm doing great. It's like you said, it's crunch time, right? It's squeeze season. It's flip season. It's rumor season. It's basically the scramble season, right? Kids are talking less and less. There's still one more visit weekend, so there's still some shuffling to go, but we're 6 days away, my brother.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting right up on it. And, one of the biggest sharks in terms of flip guys in the SEC is Kirby Smart. But I think he's pretty much identified the guys he wants to go after. And you might not see. I think all of his flips are done. He had it in early National Signing Day, right, with Jermaine Burton. So I think his, fireworks are done. But we're going to talk about 2 guys in particular that committed today, John. We had a little bit of breaking news. Auburn got themselves a big old 6'7" tight end. Tell us a little bit about who committed to Auburn today.
Yeah, Brandon Frazier out of Texas, 6'7", over 200 pounds. This guy lines up at wide receiver, inline tight end. He's offset in the backfield. He's a wing. Basically, he's a matchup nightmare in any level. Imagine in high school. So Auburn dips into the state of Texas. And really, this is all about Chad Morris, right? So he's the head coach at Arkansas. Brandon was committed to Arkansas under Chad. Obviously, a more wide open offense, want to get the football down the field. And look, if you're looking at Arkansas these days, you're probably going to have a chance to play as a freshman. So all those characteristics carried over to Auburn once Chad got the OC job under Gus Malzahn. Look, this is a big deal in Auburn. Gus Malzahn is deferring to Chad Morris. Gus is very prideful when it comes to calling the plays, but he has publicly said before any practices, look, Chad's my guy. Chad's going to call the plays and run this offense. And I think Auburn's offensive targets have shifted since then, but no bigger tangible gain than Brandon Frazier. Had 24 offers. Really, at the end, though, it was, hey, do I stick with Arkansas despite the coaching change or move on to Auburn and follow Chad Morris, who's the guy that he's closest to in the process? Obviously, he did the latter, and he thinks he can play right away. And you watch the tape, and he's got a case. Again, I mentioned the size, but this kid is actually a runner. He runs incredibly well after the catch. He's not a big body position guy and try to out-rebound a defender. This is a tight end. You could throw it too short, and he could take it a long way. So I think there's a lot to like with Brandon Frazier. He's a little light. He's going to hit that ACC weight room and certainly look to gain weight and be more balanced. But as a pass catcher, you can't teach 6'7".
No, you absolutely cannot. Let me ask you this, John. Is this, move from Chad Morris, are the days of Auburn running the ball 65% of the time on offense, are those done? I mean, you're saying Gus Malzahn's going to relinquish the play calling duties. How much of that's really true? And, what's going to happen moving forward? Are they going more air raid? I know Chad Morris is more notoriously known for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you got Bo Nix in place, and he's a guy who did that in high school. True spread.
Mhm.
He had true manipulative power at the line of scrimmage. I think you're going to see more of that with Bo Nix in year two. They've got great targets already on the outside coming back. Seth Williams, probably the top guy there. And now this recruiting class has a bit of a mixture, bigger guys, smaller, quicker guys, versatile guys. So I think Auburn's going to throw the ball a lot more going forward. And like we said, Gus is very prideful with the play calling and his offense. But Chad Morris is his guy. They're both Arkansas, Texas type of guys. They've worked together in the past. And basically, it was a matter of when and not if Chad was going to join that Auburn staff after Arkansas dismissed him. So he's been thinking about this for a long time. And for him to declare that it's Chad's offense this early, I think it was part of recruiting. It was part of, hey, this is truly going to be his show, and I'll play CEO a little bit. So kudos to Gus Malzahn for taking a step back there. And I think it'll be big for Auburn's offense. They need to play that way to win the SEC.
For sure. Now, is there a better pairing of assistants in the SEC right now, do you think, than Chad Morris as an offensive coordinator paired with Gus Malzahn and Kevin Steele on that flip end, who's now the second highest paid assistant in all of college football? So Gus Malzahn definitely relinquishing a lot of responsibilities, right? And look, man, Gus is not known to be a recruiter. He's known to be an offensive specialist. Now he's given up the offensive end. He's not known for any defensive prowess at all. And Kevin Steele's got all of his hands tied in over there. So apart from situational, football, what he plays on Saturday and the decisions, timeouts, clock management, all that stuff, things that Gus Malzahn's great at, what keeps one of those coordinators from pushing him out the door in a couple of years, John?
Yeah, I think that could be interesting. Kevin Steele is not getting any younger. And this offense has nowhere to go but up in terms of production, right? Bo Nix had some moments, but really Auburn had to scratch and claw for everything offensively. And Steele's unit was one of the best in America, especially up front with a couple of potential first rounders. I know you'll get to that a little bit later. But I do think that both of these guys are absolutely head coaching candidates down the line. And again, you have to be encouraged if you're an Auburn fan with a freshman quarterback to rattle off the wins they did with that schedule. Remember, they started with Oregon, a team that would have been in the playoff if they didn't beat them. So Auburn is definitely trending in the right direction. And yeah, I think it'll be an interesting push-pull there with Malzahn. But I like what Auburn's doing, no doubt.
All right, so Auburn wasn't the only one that got a commitment today from a highly touted prospect. Dajon Edwards, the in-state tailback, well, kind of in-state. He is in-state, but it is down there.
Yeah, way down there in South
Between
Georgia, Colquitt County, of course.
Yeah.
The old Rush Probst territory, right? I saw Dajon for the first time about 2 years ago, and he was a little bit banged up at a camp. I was like, it was at an Auburn camp, and I was like, hey, is this like a walk-on? Like this dude is a young guy for Auburn or something? They're like, no, that kid's in high school. He was that physically developed that early in his prep career, a legitimate 5'10", 5'11", 210 pounds, powerful downhill in between the runners. You think of Georgia running backs, and you think of kids who look like Dajon Edwards. I think his recruiting maybe didn't take off nationally because he wasn't a camp guy. He wasn't a 40-yard dash guy. He's not very well known out of the backfield, things like that. But this could be one of those where you look back in a couple of years and say, man, how did that kid get to this deep part of the recruiting process before being committed? And I think for Georgia, the fit is ideal. I know the offense is going to open up, Brooks. I know, but the foundation, I think, is still going to be the same. That running back stable is not going anywhere anytime soon. And this haul with Kendall Milton is one of the best in the country, especially in between the tackles.
Yeah, and I was looking at some Dajon Edwards tape, obviously, and after tonight's show, I'll be doing a full film breakdown on the YouTube channel that I got going over there, so just a little plug on that. But, not an elite burner, right, like you talked about, not a camp guy. He doesn't look great in shorts and a T-shirt, but when you put on the tape, there's some game speed there, and he played what we call grown man football down there in that conference. You look at his highlight tape, and almost 60% of it's him playing against Valdosta High School. So, we're talking about grown. Yeah, we're talking about grown man football in the high school environment down there in Georgia. So, again, not going to leave anybody, but you talk about that offense opening up at the University of Georgia. Dajon can do some work out of the backfield. Tapes filled with swing passes, tapes filled with, even free releases out of the backfield where he's the hot, things like that, wheel routes, being able to track the ball really well over his head. So though he's a big back, though he's a one-cut back and whatnot, he's going to be able to do all the things that he's required to do at the next level. I've seen a lot of comments about, whether or not he's just a roster filler or a space filler or whatnot. Look, Kirby Smart had his pick of the litter at the running back position. They don't do that at Georgia anymore, ladies and gentlemen. If they bring in a guy on, it's because Kirby Smart and Dale McGee specifically has identified a talent. I don't care if what 24/7 or SI All-American says about his 40 time, and whether or not it's a 4.8 or a 4.56, like it says on his huddle film and his max preps, which is what he reports. Okay. The burner's not there. It's not going to happen, but one cut back, and this is a staff that's identified talent in Dejon Edwards. And look, he said so today. Dale McGee never stopped recruiting him. Never stopped recruiting him from the moment he laid eyes on him as a true freshman there at Colquitt County. So the talent was identified a long time ago, and they've been in contact the entire time. John, let me ask you, who are some of the bigger remaining targets? What are some of those fireworks we mentioned earlier in the show that have yet to go off? And, what should we be paying attention to over the next 6 days leading up to National Signing Day?
Yeah, I think, Brooks, you got guys on either side of the coin, committed and uncommitted, with some movement ahead. You mentioned Georgia has already made their flips. Well, they've got to maintain a couple of big guys up front, right? Broderick Jones, Cedric Van Pran, the top center in America. These guys are taking trips elsewhere this weekend. Jones to Auburn, clear top target for the Tigers now that they got their tight end today. And then Van Pran going down to UF to check out Dan Mullen and the Gators. Big target for them as well. They've plucked from that school in Louisiana recently with Chester Kimbrough. So you wonder how close they are and maybe if that bond will help the Gators close the gap with Georgia. I do expect both of them to stick. A gun to my head right now, especially Van Pran. I think he's really solid.
Yeah.
Just not a well-traveled kid, wanted to take some trips, and who could blame him, right? They're free trips to nice parts of the country. So those are some committed prospects. Malachi Wideman's another one. He's got some SEC looks. Tennessee is the school in the conference right now that I think has a chance to flip the Florida State wide receiver commitment. He was at Oregon last weekend, loved it. He's going to Ole Miss this weekend. And remember, he was going to take an FAU trip when Lane Kiffin was down there. So watch out for the Rebels late. You got the feeling Lane's going to have something for somebody here late. Could be Zach Evans. It could be Malachi Wideman. It could be a multitude of guys here late in the cycle. But Lane's splash is a coming. So I'd keep an eye on that visit with Wideman. And then in terms of the uncommitted guys, it all starts with McKinley Jackson in the SEC. He's a guy that every school would drop a kid to add to their list. 6'3", 320 pounds, interior talent who's been a name for 2 or 3 years. Has ebbed and flowed in terms of his performance, but he's definitely peaking at the right time, dominant at the Alabama-Mississippi All-Star game, and really good at the All-American Bowl out in Texas. Excuse me. So Jackson, Alabama, LSU, Texas A&M, probably the top schools there. Auburn's still in it a little bit, and the in-state schools won't go away, but at this point, it looks like an Alabama A&M battle. So keep an eye on McKinley Jackson. He's going to A&M this weekend, so we'll see if they can make up ground on Alabama. So McKinley's definitely the biggest fish out there in the SEC. And like you said, schools are filling out pretty fast. Can an Ennis Rakestraw add to one of these classes? Maybe Bama, maybe Missouri. He's going to Texas this weekend, the DB from the state of Texas. Maybe they could be a late addition, but numbers are really tight right now. So it could be drop season. It could be flip season. There's still some movement to go, but those are some of the biggest names we're watching.
That's what I was about to ask you, and you kind of hit on it a little bit, or at least touched on it. How much movement should we see from, or are we going to see from some of these classes where, some of them are filled up or look to be filled up with commitments, but not yet signed? How much shuffling could we see going on, especially in the SEC, with maybe even a big team like Alabama?
It's got to start with Alabama. They've got the most commitments, maybe out of all the schools that are in the top 10 of the
26 currently.
Yeah, SI All-American rankings. They could shuffle 3 guys that are currently committed right now, depending on who's jumping on board. You're not going to say no to McKinley Jackson. You might not say no to Ennis Rakestraw. And they're still recruiting some other guys. They just got a grad transfer tight end as well. So their spots are extremely bubbly right now. And those guys on the bubble are definitely feeling it a little bit. I would be shocked if these verbal commitments who haven't signed, you're talking Jason Jones, Javon Baker, Damian George, guys like that. If all 3 of those guys signed with Alabama, I would be absolutely floored. It would be as shocking as George Pickens going to Georgia, right? Not a lot of people saw that one coming, but I do think Alabama is going to drop a couple of kids and shuffle a couple of kids around, especially if McKinley Jackson's still feeling the tide after this weekend.
Not exactly breaking news, but I'll get your opinion on this before we get you out of here on tonight's broadcast, John.
What you got?
Gunnar Stockton, 2022 quarterback, just received an offer from Ohio State. What do you think about the in-state quarterback here from Rabun County? Kirby Smart took the Kirby copter to Rabun County as a true freshman to watch Gunnar Stockton play some football. A keynote game here in the state of Georgia this year. Rabun County will play Prince Avenue this year, September 4th. So you could have two guys that might share a roster spot at the University of Georgia, and Brock Vandergriff facing off from Prince Avenue against Gunnar Stockton. What are your early thoughts on a really, really young guy who can absolutely spin it at the quarterback position?
Absolutely. I think he's a modern day quarterback. Yes, he can sit in the pocket, deliver the football down the field, outside the numbers, play the intermediate routes, get through a progression. All of those things, varsity level, check, check, check. But I think the athleticism, the mobility shows up when you look at a kid like this. And that's required now. The dual threat pro style thing, let's throw that out the window. Let's throw that out the window. If you're playing quarterback in 2020 and beyond in big-time college football, and certainly in the NFL, the big statues of yesteryear, you just can't be one. You can't be one and succeed in this modern day. And Stockton won't have to worry about that. He's already showcased great mobility early on. And like you said, no surprise, Ohio State's in, Georgia's in. This kid's going to have a national offer list, and he'll probably be committed before he's an upperclassman at the high school level, I would think, because kids who are coveted that early typically get it done a little bit earlier. So he's going to sort of set the pace in that class of 2022. And last thing here, Brooks, everybody thinks California is the state for quarterbacks, and they certainly keep turning them out. They had the top 2 or 3 this year, but the state of Georgia, Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, Jake Fromm, Brock Vandergriff,
Deshaun Watson.
Every year. Oh, yeah, that guy. Not bad.
That guy.
Cam Newton, right? Yeah, it's not going to stop anytime soon. The state of Georgia may be the most important in America as we progress, beyond 2020. It's that good. It's getting that much better. That's where I begin my evaluations. Miami and Atlanta. That's where things start for national recruiting coverage, 2020 and beyond.
Yeah, and I don't think, just before I get you out of here, I'll get your quick comments on this as well. I don't think that has, I think it might have to do with a little bit of a coincidence that guys like Tony Ballard, Quincy Avery, Cam Newton, 7-on-7 camps, all 3 of those guys are based here in Atlanta. All these quarterbacks, when you go to these camps, there's 12, 14, 15 quarterbacks out there working with guys who have pro knowledge at the quarterback position, technically sound as they can be. And it started with Deshaun Watson, with Quincy getting with him very, very early. And it's just sprung from that point. And obviously great talent and great football here in the state of Georgia. So, looking forward to seeing those guys. John, man, as always, appreciate you for joining us here on SEC Nightly. Tell the folks how they can find all your great work.
Absolutely. siallamerican.com. We're about a month old, but things are certainly cranking out. A lot of video content. I'm trying to get my Brooks Austin on over here in New York. And signing days in 6 days. So we got a lot of coverage coming up. Yes, we're going to cover Zach Evans. We're going to try to cover the entire gauntlet of the biggest names remaining, even those like Evans who may not even sign on Wednesday. So more on that at siallamerican.com.
Yeah, stay tuned on that one. We got some big things coming on the Evans front. John, man, always appreciate you, my brother.
Thank you.
Man, I cut him off and sent him out before I could even get his full thanks. But John knows we appreciate him, and he is always welcome here on the broadcast. Let's take a quick break to remind you to check out all of our team sites, man. Head over to si.com, find your favorite team. If you're an Auburn fan, if you're a Georgia fan, if you're a Tennessee fan, most of these people that will watch this via my social media, most likely are dog fans. You guys know where to find me. SI's Bulldog Maven. Just Google it. Bulldog Maven. You'll find it right there. And with that being said, we'll get right into our next segment because we're already 20 minutes in to tonight's live broadcast, and we appreciate you guys for listening. Let's get right into our next segment. We told you we were going to do some NFL draft talk. There are 22 names. I found 22 names in at least one major market and major media brand mock draft leading up to the draft at this point here in, end of January. It's almost February at this point. Combine's right around the corner. We'll have pro days and all that great stuff. And then we'll have the draft. As of right now, again, 22 names. I'll list them off right now real quick. And then just a pre-note here. 8 of them from Alabama, a 10-2 Alabama football team in the regular season. eight players in NFL first round mock draft, 6 from the defending national championship LSU Tigers, and 4 from the Georgia Bulldogs. The rest are kind of scattered throughout the rest of the SEC. But let's hit on these names right here. Obviously, Burrow and Tua, Derek Brown, Andrew Thomas, Javon Kinlaw, Jedrick Wills, the tackle from Alabama, Henry Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy, both wideouts from Alabama, C.J. Henderson, the corner out of Florida, Clavon Chasen, the edge rusher there from LSU, had a great game in the national championship game. Didn't quite have, eye-popping stats at least, but was a major impact on that football game if you watched it closely. Xavier McKinney, the free safety out of Alabama, the junior early enroll or early declaree for the draft. DeAndre Swift, obviously the tailback from Georgia. Patrick Queen, a really fast, really quick linebacker from LSU. Grant Delpit, the safety. Noah, the corner from Auburn. Man, I'm not even going to try to pronounce your last name. I try to consider myself a semi-pro broadcaster, but I'm not even going to try this one, man. Not until I hear it a couple more times. Just know he's number 4 from Auburn. He is a dog. I'm talking about a dog. Former wide receiver, got incredible ball skills, and one of the faster guys in the SEC. Justin Jefferson, the wide receiver from LSU, is getting first-round mock drafts. Raekwon Davis, obviously the defensive lineman from Alabama. We move on to our last Alabama guy, I believe. No, we got one more on the list. Alex Leatherwood, the tackle. Solomon Kinley, the interior offensive lineman from Georgia. Terrell Lewis, our last name, the defensive end from Alabama. Christian Fulton, the DB from LSU. And Isaiah Wilson getting first-round mock drafts, the big redshirt sophomore offensive tackle from the University of Georgia. So that's all the names. Look, I could go through each one of these, give you their player profile, how I think they grade out, all that nonsense, all that fun stuff. Look, I'm going to save some time, okay, because we're running up on the clock here. What I'm going to do is a little game. We're going to play a little game I like to call locks, flops, and long shots, okay? I'm going to give you 2 names of these 22 that might be getting first-round grades that I think are flat-out locks, guys that will be Pro Bowl caliber football players at the NFL level, at least in my opinion. The flops, guys that, I'm just not sold on right now as first-round draft picks coming out of the SEC. And then the long shots, guys that are getting first-round grades that I don't really think have any business being in that first-round discussion. I think it's really, really early in the process. A lot of talking heads and a lot of people giving mock drafts that might not have the full scouting profile just yet, because how could you? Again, it's very, very early in the process. The combine's still left to be done. And there's always people that leave the combine and jump right up the ranks and right up the charts. So let's get right into it. Let's start with the locks. Again, these are guys that I think are going to be Pro Bowl caliber football players in the NFL. And I think these are 2 very, very safe picks coming out of the SEC right now. And it's Derek Brown and Andrew Thomas. Okay, we'll start with Derek Brown. He may have been the most physically dominant interior defensive lineman that I've watched at the college level since Ndamukong Suh. I really think it's like that. And Ndamukong Suh did that crap out there in the Big 12 when the Big 12 was even more of a joke defensively or offensively in terms of interior offensive line play. The SEC is not that. Look, I can show you clips of Derek Brown taking Cade Mays, the 6'6", 330-pound Cade Mays, and tossing him like a rag doll. Like they were back on a high school football field and Derek Brown was putting on Huddle, his greatest highlight tapes. And it wasn't that. This was an SEC football game against a 2-year starter in the conference, and a guy who's pretty damn good and is going to play fairly well at Tennessee if and when he gets cleared in Cade Mays. So, again, one of the more physically dominant football players I've ever evaluated and ever taken a look at the interior defensive line position. You should not be able to throw grown men around like this guy does. He single-handedly. I know Kevin Steele did a great job defensively with that 3-7-1 that Kirk Herbstreit was talking so heavily about in the national championship game, a scheme that Georgia tried to copy, a scheme that Clemson tried to copy when they played LSU. But look, I'm telling you right now, if you go back and watch that tape against the Tigers, Auburn's defense was solely predicated on Derek Brown playing out of his absolute ever-loving mind against double teams and winning every single snap. He is a lock to be a Pro Bowl player in the NFL. My next guy, who I think is going to be, a 10-year vet in the NFL at the offensive tackle position and, may not ever be listed as the best offensive tackle or in the conversation for number 1 OT in the league, it's Andrew Thomas. But I'll tell you what Andrew Thomas is going to be. Andrew, like I said, is going to be a 10-year NFL vet. He'll make a handful of Pro Bowls, and he'll silently leave the league. And here in 2030, you'll look up and you'll go, my God, Andrew Thomas is still on a playoff football team and is still playing left tackle and doing it really, really well. And when you watch him, again, he's never going to flash on tape. Now, he'll do some crazy athletic things that might flash on tape. There was a play against Auburn where he literally threw a guy down, put him on his face on an outside move. They're running, toss sweep, and then he blocks an outside linebacker, throws the outside linebacker down, and then gets to the safety, blocks three guys in one play. Kind of athleticism and kind of offensive line stuff that you don't see very often. So he can do that kind of stuff, but he's never going to flat back someone 30 yards downfield. Okay, that's not the type of football player that Andrew Thomas is. He wins with feet and hand placement, which are two things that can get you a 10-year and solid NFL career. Those are my two locks, Derek Brown and Andrew Thomas. Look, I'm going to stop right now and talk about the two quarterbacks that are up in this first round and top 10 caliber discussion and conversation in Joe Burrow and Tua Tagovailoa. Look, I believe highly in both of them. All right, but here's the deal. When you're projected to go get drafted with the Cincinnati Bengals and the Miami Dolphins, and I know this is an extremely, extremely easy take. Look, that's more of a bet on that situation and that environment than it is even on the players. I have no idea what Joe Burrow is going to look like in that Cincinnati Bengals disorganized and dysfunctional organization up there in Cincinnati. I don't know what it's going to look like. I know that Miami's kind of gotten things turned around. They won 4 or 5 games this year in a season where people were expecting them to, go 0-16. I know it looked fairly okay, and they did all that with Ryan Fitzpatrick at the quarterback position. But again, I just don't know what that dysfunction is going to look like when Tua gets there. We thought we knew Baker Mayfield after 1 year that he was going to be dynamite. Well, guess what? In year 2, guess what? You're back to not knowing. Is Baker Mayfield an NFL quarterback? I don't think you can honestly say, either which way. Same thing with Sam Darnold. We want to throw all the praise on Lamar Jackson, but in year 1, there were people throwing dirt on his NFL career already. So it's a fluid situation. It's a lot based about, who's around you at the quarterback position and what kind of support system you have at that position. Whereas Derek Brown and Andrew Thomas, they could go play for a semi-pro league or, a team from the XFL that somehow got thrown into an NFL environment with nobody around them. And they're still going to be one of the better players on the football field because a lot of that's a one-on-one matchup and a one-on-one situation. Let's get into these flops. Again, these are guys that are getting first-round hype that I just don't necessarily believe in. And, I'm sorry about the national champs, and I hope no LSU guys and fans are listening to me, guys and gals. But I'm picking 2 guys off the national championship team. It's 2 guys that I don't necessarily believe to be first-round talents, or at least going to perform at first-round grades, at least at this very early point, again, in the draft process. And, as is the case a lot of the time, not a lot of the times, but sometimes in the draft evaluation process, I will be wrong. It's going to happen, all right? You're going to miss some guys. You're going to think some guys are great that you got some bias towards that are, you think are first-round caliber talents like I do with Derek Brown and Andrew Thomas, and they might miss. I don't think either one of them are going to. That's why they're my locks. But I don't think either of these 2 guys, and this is my opinion, are first-round caliber grades. Let's get right into it. Christian Fulton is the first one. I know Derek Stingley is the next great thing. I really do. That true freshman cornerback, really, really long there at LSU, had 2 picks in the SEC championship game, played lights out in the national championship game. I understand what Derek Stingley is, but it is never good when you play corner opposite of a true freshman and you're a senior and you're the guy that's getting picked on. Okay, I don't think that leads me to believe that you are a first-round caliber corner, even though your counterpart is 100% going to be probably a top 10 to top 15 pick. So, and not to mention, Christian Fulton is a 4-year cornerback who's only been a 2-year starter at LSU. And in those 2 years, he's never been the primary corner. He's never been the number 1 corner. Last year, it was Denzel Ward. Not Denzel Ward, excuse me. Went to help me out here, commenters. Got drafted by the Cleveland Browns and from LSU. We'll figure it out later. I'll probably Google it if I got some downtime. I don't have a producer here, guys. When everyone else in the radio business runs out of things to say or they draw a blank on a name, they get a producer right in their ear. I don't have one of those. My producer is you commenters that are on. Sorry about that, folks. I just got dropped. But we're back in it now, and we're back rolling. But anyways, back to Christian Fulton. Never was the primary corner and was constantly getting picked on there at LSU. I think he's got some NFL traits. He played fairly well in his 10 starts as a junior. Not so great the second year, but they were on the field a lot more in their national championship season this year due to just that offensive system there at LSU. Let's move on to my next guy, Patrick Queen. Look, I think he's the best inside linebacker in the draft when playing in space and using his speed. He can run around just about anybody at the college level. The problem is when he does get engaged with blockers, he has a real difficult time separating and creating space again and getting off the block, disengaging. I think that's going to be an issue at the next level, whether or not he's going to be able to get off blocks, because you're not going to be able to run around and away from everybody at the NFL level. Those guys are athletes too. Those guys are really fast. All right, into my long shots category. Again, these are guys that are receiving first-round caliber mock drafts, have been in several and a handful of first-round drafts from a handful of experts that, again, I just don't think they will end up there. I think this is very, very early NFL draft, Twitter and NFL draft world hype, just because you don't really have the full evaluation here. You don't really have the full picture until after the combine and after all the random names and small school guys pop up in there, and you really figure out who's the physical specimens of the bunch. But these two guys, they're two Georgia guys. They're two guys that I watched a lot this year that I just don't understand. When people tell me that they have a first-round grade on these two guys, I simply do not get it. It blows my mind. Not maybe necessarily with the second guy, but with the first guy especially. All right, Solomon Kinley, we'll start with him. For that guy to be getting first-round draft grades, this is a guy who, if you would have asked me 2 months ago after the Sugar Bowl, whenever the Sugar Bowl was, or no, let's go SEC. If you would have asked me after December 7th, hey, does Solomon Kinley come back or does he declare for the draft? I would have looked at you like, why are we even asking this question? Solomon Kinley will return for his last year at Georgia. Well, I was absolutely wrong on that. His draft grade's obviously much higher than I originally, thought it was, prior to the end of the, culmination of the 2019 season. But that I was thinking more of like third to fifth. And I still think, we're talking about a second round draft pick. For him to get first round caliber grades is a little bit shocking to me, because here's the deal. First round offensive guards, interior offensive linemen, these are physical freaks and two-way players. When I mean that, what I'm saying is they're elite in the pass blocking game. They're elite in the run blocking game. They can play in any system ever designed, because you have to if you're going to invest in a first-round guy. Like I said, at the interior offensive line position, it is a devalued draft position in terms of the NFL draft. That being said, Solomon Kinley is none of those. He is not a physical specimen. He is not a physical, an athletic freak. He's not going to go to the combine and run a 4.88 at 320 pounds. Matter of fact, I'm thinking more like 5'1", 5'2" would be very, very optimistic for a guy with that body type and with that shape. But then again, that body type and that shape is the reason he is an absolute road grader in the run game, which I think it could loft him into a second round grade if a team like Baltimore or, let's think of another inside zone run heavy football team. Find one for me. That's where he needs to go. He doesn't need to be running outside zone. He doesn't need to be going to a pass happy football team, because he's not, an elite pass blocker. He is a run blocker, an inside zone run blocker. And again, I've sat here for 2.5 minutes now and isolated the strengths and weaknesses of Solomon Kinley. And if you're going to be a first-round caliber guard, you can't have any weaknesses. Chris Lindstrom did not have any weaknesses in his football game last year. He went 14th overall. Quentin Nelson went 6th or 7th to the Indianapolis Colts, 2-year Pro Bowler, 2 years in the league. No weaknesses. Those are the kind of football players that go first round at the guard position. I think Solly's going to be great in the NFL, not a first-round caliber football player, in my opinion. And I watched him closely, obviously, this year. On to my next guy, Isaiah Wilson. I get this from a physical attributes place, kind of the opposite of Solly. I understand. Look, Isaiah Wilson, 6'7", 335 pounds, built like a brick shit house. Sorry for the kids listening right now. I'm talking about built. They don't make them, they don't roll them off the factory line looking better than Isaiah Wilson in terms of offensive tackles. The only problem is he's a redshirt sophomore who had to sit a year his freshman year because he had conditioning issues and things like that going on. Very limited reps. Now, that's not to say he is not a first-round caliber offensive tackle in, say, another 13 or 14 NFL starts, or SEC starts, for him to develop a little bit more, technique, because he is a really, really raw as an athlete and as a prospect right now. Thank you, commenters. Finally got the LSU cornerback. Greedy Williams. Thank you, Duke Tucker, via YouTube. You are the champ. Back to Isaiah Wilson, 6'7", right? We talked about it. And physical. Once he gets his hands on you, reps over. He won. The only problem is still a little bit of a leaner, plays with his head over his toes. That's not very good for an offensive lineman, especially one as big as him. And, you know, outside of, you know, the experience issue, I think it's a technique issue at this point. And, again, that might take some time just to sculpt him up and get him ready to play. But if you're going to draft a tackle in the first round, it better not be a guy who I personally believe is not going to be able to make the switch to left tackle in the league. If you're taking first-round caliber offensive linemen, offensive tackles in particular, I think you need a mainstay at the left tackle position. I know the right tackle position has been a little bit more valued over recent time in the NFL, but I still think Isaiah Wilson has a little bit of flaw in his game, and I really do think he could have used another year in the SEC. Man, I ran way too long tonight, over 6 minutes over, but you know what? I think it was a good show. I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. You know, follow the show on Twitter. That's how you show your support, man. It's at SEC Nightly. We're the only ones. If you guys want to, and, you know, send some questions in over there if you have some questions or show topics or show ideas that you want to hear about, or film breakdowns that I'm about to get into. I'm about to break out the Dejon Edwards tape. Hopefully I can get my buddy from Colquitt County's coaching staff to send me the raw tape so I don't have to watch the highlights. Obviously, the highlights are going to be good. Don't watch the highlights, guys. If you can get hands on all 22, if you can get hands on the coaching tape, if you're going to be an evaluator, do it that way. Do it the correct way. Anyways, back to what we're talking about. Support the show. Follow us on Twitter. And if you missed any portion of tonight's broadcast, I know a lot of people are in and out. We do have a podcast platform. Again, just search SEC Nightly wherever, however you get your podcast. Those listening on the podcast, man, I drank a lot of coffee tonight. Those listening to the podcast right now, man, give us a subscribe right there. Give us a 5-star rating and leave us a review. And those listening to us on the broadcast right now over there on Periscope and Facebook and YouTube and all that great stuff, man, pound that screen, hit those likes, hit that thumbs up, whatever it is there to give us a support, show it to us. We appreciate you guys for doing all that. And we'll see you tomorrow night, man. We do this Monday through Friday. Tomorrow is Friday, last show of the week. So get those questions in. My direct messages are always open on Twitter. Of course, you got a request to send one, and I do have to approve it. So watch the trolls. We'll see you guys next time. This has been SEC Nightly. I'm Brooks Austin. Go kick today's ass.